Good morning, everybody, and nice to see you. It's Tuesday morning, and welcome to Pen Vicarage. Hope you're well and cheerful. As always, thank you for joining us for our Bible talk for today as we continue our adventure through the amazing book of Psalms. Now, my friends, just to give you a bit of advance notice, next week is Holy Week, and the week after, which is Easter week, my colleagues are going to do these morning Bible talks. They're going to do some sort of Holy Weeky ones next week, and they're going to do 105 different takes on Psalm 150 during Easter week, the celebration week as well. So looking forward to those then. But for this week, you've got me. And we are in Psalm 102, which is in book 4 of the 5 books of the Psalms. And so without further ado, Psalm 102 it will be. Hear my prayer, O Lord, let my cry come to you. Do not hide your face from me in the day of my distress. Incline your ear to me, answer me speedily in the day when I call. For my days pass away like smoke, and my bones burn like a furnace. My heart is stricken and withered like grass. I am too wasted to eat my bread. Because of my loud groaning, my bones cling to my skin. I am like an owl of the wilderness, like a little owl of the waste places. I lie awake. I am like a lonely bird on the housetop. All day long my enemies taunt me. Those who deride me use my name for a curse. For I eat ashes like bread and mingle tears with my drink, because of your indignation and anger. For you have lifted me up and thrown me aside. My days are like an evening shadow. I wither away like grass. But you, O Lord, are enthroned forever. Your name endures through all generations. You will rise up and have compassion on Zion, for it's time to favour it. The appointed time has come. For your servants hold its stones dear, and have pity on its dust. The nations will fear the name of the Lord, and all the kings of the earth your glory. For the Lord will build up Zion. He will appear in his glory. He will regard the prayer of the destitute and will not despise their prayer. Let this be recorded for a generation to come, so that people yet unborn may praise the Lord, that he looked down from his holy height. From heaven the Lord looked on the earth to hear the groans of the prisoners, to set free those who were doomed to die, so that the name of the Lord may be declared in Zion, and his praise in Jerusalem, when peoples gather together and kingdoms to worship the Lord. He's broken my strength in my mid-course. He's shortened my days. O my God, I say, do not take me away at the midpoint of my life, you whose years endure throughout all generations. Long ago you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will endure. They will all wear out like a garment. You change them like clothing, and they pass away. But you are the same, and your years have no end. The children of your servants shall live secure. Their offspring shall be established in your presence. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, complex psalm this one. I'll give my best to try and explain it to you. I think the psalm, the context, we don't actually know the specific context, but the guy is really in trouble. I mean, in the italics before the psalm, it says, a prayer of one afflicted when faint and pleading before the Lord. Okay, which is kind of a pretty good description of what it is. But exactly what that fainting and what that pleading was, we do not know. The structure, the psalm fits quite neatly into 3 sections. Verses 1 to 11 is what you might call a prayer for help from God. Verses 12 to 22 are affirming God's reign over, that God reigns over all things. And in the end, verses 23 to the end kind of brings it all together, sort of combines the 2 bits in the final bit there as well. So 3 sections, 1 to 11, 12 to 22, and 23 to the end. The kind of 3 sections there. So taking them one at a time. First is the first is 1 to 11. This, as I say, it's a cry for help. We do not know, as I say, what the trouble the guy was in. It's thought it might have been terminal illness. Some things that could have, some think it might have been to do with the people, God being taken to exile. We do not know. But what is quite clear is that the guy here is in a lot of trouble. And he uses some very strong language to kind of illustrate it, doesn't he? You know, eating ashes like bread and mingling tears to my drink. I lie awake like a lonely bird on a housetop. So you get the impression that he's lonely. You get the impression that he's suffering. You get the impression that he's tired and utterly worn out. And that's the kind of place where he's praying from. So that's where he's at. The second section is all about the reign of God, verses 12 to 23. In verse 12, it says, but you've had all this about where problem the guy's in. And he goes, but you, O Lord, are enthroned forever. It's a huge change in verse 12. But you, O Lord, are enthroned forever. So he's been pouring out his problems before God before God. Then he goes on to talk about, but you, O Lord, are enthroned forever. And he goes on to talk about what God is going to do, that God is going to have compassion, and that he cares about the people, and all the nations will fear the name of the Lord. And he also looks back to times in the past as well. He talks about the time when these people have cried out to him, and that he looked down from the height of heaven. From heaven the Lord looked at the earth to hear the groans of the prisoners, to set free those who were doomed to die. I think he's looking back to the time of when they were enslaved in Egypt. So he's looking back to the past, looking forward to the future, but basically rejoicing in the praise of God there. It's also interesting in that section as well that it's not just him that's got problems at the moment, it's all the people are clearly in trouble too. And then finally, in the last few verses, verses 23 and 24 kind of recapitulate, that's a good word, isn't it? Go back to where it was before about about the problems that he's in, and then verses 25 at the end, he talks about what God is going to do. That in the past, God's helped the people. He's laid the foundation of the earth. He talks about they will perish, but you will endure. So he kind of, in the last 6 verses, he kind of brings together the first section, the second section, his problems with the reign of God. So 3 sections there, 1 to 11, 12 to 22, and 23 to the end. And I suppose I just want to bring out 3 kind of overarching things from this. Firstly, what is interesting is that if you read it carefully, the guy himself is clearly in lots of problems himself, as I've said. I mean, and he pours out his heart very, in very strong terms to God about how he's at. But what's quite clear also is that his people are clearly in trouble at the time. He talk verse 13, where you will rise up like compassion on Zion, but it's time to favour it. The appointed time has come. So he's talking about favour the people as well. I think what is interesting is that the guy who wrote this, and he doesn't say who it is, it's kind of got David, but it's quite hard to tell. Whoever wrote it isn't just interested in his own problems. He also cares about the people too. He doesn't just care about where he's at, and despite the fact he's clearly in loads of problems himself. He clearly wants God to help the people too. So he doesn't just pray about his own problems. He prays about the problems of God's people too. And actually, it's important that we do that we don't just care about our own problems, but we care about the church, that we care about the society, that we care about the world, and that we care about more than, as I say, just ourselves, even when we're in grave problems like the guys in here. So here you've got weaved together both the personal prayer and also the corporate prayer as well, praying not just for himself, but the people around him too. The second thing I like about this psalm is that the guy's clearly got lots of problems, and the reality of his situation is clearly a dire one. But despite that, he still looks up to God. He takes his mind off his problems, and he looks up to God. And that the reality of the situation that he's in is not good. But he has utter faith in God that God will sort it out. And I think often our situations like that, we what we see around us can be difficult and confusing and so on, and we can wonder what to do with it. But actually, despite all this, God reigns. We might say with the guy here, but you, O Lord, are enthroned forever. And the great thing about this psalm is, despite the fact he's got considerable problems himself, he has faith enough to look to God and know that God's got it, that God's got, and then, but you, O Lord, are enthroned forever. Your name endures for all generations. And things may be difficult for him now, but he says to God in verse 13, you will rise up and have compassion on Zion. And he tries to give him a clue. For it's time, it is the time to favour it. The appointed time has come. So he says to God, I think now's the time to get it sorted out too. Finally, I think what's also interesting from the Psalm 2 is the possible Jesus connection with it. It's interesting that verses 25 to 27 are quoted almost verbatim in the book of Hebrews, chapter 1, verses 10 to 12. So the book of Hebrews, the guy who wrote Hebrews, whoever that person may be, clearly thinks this is referring to Jesus. And it's not an exact match, but there are connections. I mean, if you read some of the things about my loud crowing, my bones clinging to my skin, and people slugging him off and things like that, being his life cut off in mid-course, things like that, there are quite possibly reflections on the passion of Jesus too. But again, at the end, after Jesus has been ascended, he dies, he rises again, he ascends into heaven, and then Jesus Christ is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And the book of Hebrews clearly thinks that verses 25 to 27 of Psalm 102 are referring to Jesus. You, Lord, made the foundations of the earth, because Jesus was there at the beginning. And the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will endure. They will wear out like a garment, and so on. But because you are King Jesus, you will be there forever, and so on. You are the same, and your years have no end. The book of Hebrews also says, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. There's a possible Jesus connection too, because Jesus is now King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And the children of his servants will live secure. Their offspring will be established in your presence, because Jesus, the church is growing. God is good. Jesus is King. And we could be talking about him too. So, interesting psalm, this one. 3 things just to bring out briefly. First, he intertwines here the personal prayer with the prayer for God's people. Secondly, even though he's got huge problems, he's got faith enough to look to God and know that God's got it. And finally, check out the Jesus connection too. And the reference again was Hebrews 1, 10 to 12, which quotes verses 25 to 27 of Psalm 102. Bless you, my friends. Tomorrow's Psalm 103, an absolute beauty. You'll love tomorrow's Psalm. I hope you love today's too. Don't forget to share the messages at the bottom so your friends can enjoy them too. Have a lovely day, my friends.